Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. Automated testing is a safety net that allows innovation to walk the tightrope of progress with confidence. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on February 28th, 2024. Kris. You brought up a good topic. Automated testing or test automation. It's one of the passions that a young Padawan such as myself has when it comes to Business Central and the community.
Oh, why the dark?
But as a Padawan...
Why red?
Why red? Because...
It should be blue or light blue.
Fan. No,
you are a Star
I
Wars
like the
fan.
red. Look at this. I like this.
That is pretty
cool. Together on my trip to Disney a period of time ago.
Next time you go to Disney, get the different color that's like Business Central colors.
I will do that. That's a challenge. I will do that. But
do that. Well, you live out there. You're pretty close.
Yes. I first referred to him as the Jedi Master to the rest of us Padawans on automated testing. But as we learned in the conversation, he's actually the Godfather of automated testing. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Luc van Vugt.
We got a new doorbell. No more knocking. Let's see if we get a Ring doorbell.
Who's that? Yeah, we got a new doorbell. I had a doorbell put in yesterday. You didn't know that?
Too much knocking, man.
Who it could be? Wonder who it could be. Yeah, the knocking. I didn't want people to hurt their hands, so I put in a doorbell. I actually put in a doorbell with a camera, but the camera's not hooked up yet, so that we can see who it is. Let's see.
We gotta open the door, man.
That's it. Oh.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Good morning. Good.
Hello,
very early morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Morning.
Doing fine. Doing various things today. Calls on preps for conferences. Having some man on my roof. Getting some things restorated because of what is it called, leakages. So what else? Well, a lot to be doing today. So
a lot
that's
going on.
It
is a lot going on. We like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We do appreciate it. I read an interesting quote this morning. I don't recall by who. I'd have to look it up, but it's time is the currency of life. And money is not, some variation of that. So we do appreciate you taking your time to speak with us.
It's more than welcome.
One thing you mentioned, it is conference season's coming up, as we call it. Seems to be a lot of conferences coming up. You said you're preparing for some conferences. Which conferences are you attending?
The first one I think in line is Days of Knowledge in the Nordics one in Denmark. And then there is Dynamics Minds in Slovenia at the end of May. The Days of Knowledge one is half April. And then end of May, Dynamics Minds in Slovenia. First time I'm going to join. It's the second time they do it. And then the biggest of all for BC developers, BC tech people is BC Tech Days in Antwerp. That's, halfway June, I think, end of June, somewhere around that time. So that's my agenda for the conferences.
That is packed.
That is a packed conference in a short period of time. And those are some great conferences. I wish we had those conferences here in the United States. I keep saying I'm going to try to get over there.
There is one Days of Knowledge. There is one Days of Knowledge planned in US. At least I don't know if it's really set, but there has been word of it, September or something like that, on request of a number of partners, if I'm right. So keep your eye and ear open.
Okay.
I will. I did.
Maybe I'm speaking, but that's what I heard, and I don't have seen any dates or any communication on definite whatever, but there was some discussion on it.
I did hear rumor that September in Georgia there may be a Days of Knowledge, but like you, I have not seen anything firm yet. But I do hope that would come to the United States, because it would give the opportunity to for attendance for a lot here in the United States that can't make the trip over the pond.
Yeah.
I call it the pond now. It's over the pond, Kris. Those conferences, are you going to present at any of those conferences?
At all three.
Wow.
I must say I'm not often attending if I don't present something. And it's all in that sense. It's always a good combination. It's a couple of things like pushing myself to get into a topic more in detail or more in depth that I've been doing, and that's surely going to happen in this case too. And next to that, well, I like the dynamics of being a presenter, but also being one of the attendees. So walking around, people then easily step into you like, hey, I heard you, or I saw you, or whatever. So there's this connection being made, and at the same time hearing from others what they're doing. So that's, I think, always a good, well, let's call it a golden combination.
I agree with you. The ability to network and speak with others at conferences and learn additional information or pick up additional information is great, as well as, contributing and presenting information for others to learn is a great experience as well. And you do quite a few things for the community. And I've been looking forward to speaking with you because I have, you and I share a similar interest in one portion of Business Central. But before we jump into that, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself for those that may not know some of the things that you do for the community that are great and outstanding, some of the accomplishments that you have done?
Yeah, Luc van Vugt, a Dutch name. Vught is not easy to pronounce for a lot of people outside, but typically I joined, let's say, this world in 1999, just before the turn of the century, as a CAL developer development teacher, I should say. The local sub, so that's more than, well, almost 25 years. This May it will be 25 years. I'm one of those, let's say, labeled dinosaurs in our community. Too many in the sense of it's a challenge to get young people in, and that's one of the things I'm, well, maybe not always actively involved, but I've been teaching over those years to especially younger people getting in, which is to me very enthusing also. I try to enthuse others, but I'm also enthused by the younger ones. Being a high school teacher, by the way, before I joined this world, so working with young people has always been, well, an honor in a way, a challenge sometimes too, but surely in general a big pleasure. And currently working at a big partner ISV called 4PS in the Netherlands, which has a big solution, maybe the biggest in the world for construction and construction-related companies. And why am I saying? I mean, it's one of the companies I worked at. I like working here a lot, but one of the things I like surely is also that they succeed to always get young people in, new people anyway, but young people in, and they are very much recognized. So they're to their abilities, they're allowed to do a lot of things. So there's one guy now just became one of the architects. He's 26, I think, and he has built a lot of automation for the whole team. So the older people saw he was good at it, so get it done. And that's what enthuses me too. I work a lot with this guy specifically, but also with others, and always surprised that, well, let's say I'm this guy in the community known about test automation. Somebody called me the test automation mafia. You can't get around me. Of course, over time, you can get around me more and more, and that's a good thing. But this guy, but also others, let's say, I don't know if it's a saying in US English, but in Dutch we have something. They can show me every corner of the room, meaning something like in a boxing game you have corners. Well, you're beaten into the corners, something like so. They show me something I hadn't thought of. I'm ignorant of. I've become more and more wise enough to admit that I'm ignorant in many aspects, even though from some gut feeling I don't like to say that, but that's what I have to admit. I'm ignorant. Yeah,
That is an important acknowledgement, I think, in what we're doing. And when we've had previous episodes, we talked about sometimes you've been doing something for so long, your experience of the past is sort of like a poison because you may not think, as you had mentioned, to see some of the other angles where someone that's newer to a topic, and it doesn't have to just follow with automated testing or business central. It's just with anything in life. I agree with you. We go back to the dinosaurs. Welcome, there's plenty dinosaurs, and you had mentioned you've been working at this for about 25 years. And every time we say something like that, I think of myself because Kris had pointed out to me one time, and with you coming into the community around the same time, I think Kris was in diapers still when you started working with this. So maybe he was still in elementary school.
I was a senior in high school.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I had a conversation with Kris one time. I think he said when I got into it, it's not such, but it was like 8th grade. He wasn't even, this wasn't even a dream for him. But I do appreciate the initiative to bring more younger members to the community because, again, we are dinosaurs. We are aging. It's just a fact of the evolution of life. You can't get around that, unfortunately. So with Business Central being such a great product, it's nice to see some initiatives to bring additional members to it because it is hard to get younger, aspiring talent to come into the community because it's not quite, they may not be familiar with development from that point of view, but we also have the functional implementation side of ERP applications. So I'm thankful that we've made the move to AL and Visual Studio Code because it's more contemporary. It's a little bit easier, I think, to attract younger generations to want to work with the application from the development point of view. So hopefully
there's a little
we can
difference
get more
though.
and appreciate it.
Sorry, Brad. I remember getting someone excited, a younger, like when I got into ERP, it's not like the common things that everyone talked about. Like at the early days of my career, it was always about what your the app side. The ERP was really something that, who gets excited about that stuff, right? So it's almost like similar situation, but with the modernized AL and using VS Code, I think it's going to entice a lot more younger talent. So I think that's how I looked at it. Trying to get someone excited about ERP, it's a pretty interesting conversation. So
yeah, the thing here, I think, it's probably a faulty comparison or a parallel, but ERP is a bit like not being on Facebook or not being on those. Well, Facebook is already for the older ones, I guess, but let's say TikTok or whatever. And it's surprising. I think it would not fit each younger professional to step into this world. But those that step in and stick very often stick because of this, what is it? A kind of bond commitment to your customer, not being hypey and jumping into something next. I mean, that happens too, and it's very generalizing what I'm doing, I realize, but that's a bit how I experience it, that like couple of weeks ago, I had a short running training with 2 new guys, youngsters, and one of them is, I think he's very keen. He's very onto a lot of technology in the IT world, and well, on various things that we were discussing, he was laughing his ass off. What are you doing? I mean, you're making your life so difficult. This could be more, well, whatever. And I don't know. I think you said, Brad, it's unfortunate about this evolutionary thing, but I think it's fortunate. I like, although as a maybe emotional part of me, I don't like that youngsters do better than I am. But on the other hand, that's what it is. I mean, I can't do better, but they can. So I profit from them, and I can tell them, oh, don't run too fast or whatever. So being an old fart, or feeling, no, maybe not feeling, but maybe seen more as an old fart. Yeah, that's probably what it is. I can fully be at ease with that nowadays.
Yeah, they have a
think
new
you get to a
perspective.
point where you have
Yeah.
it. And I know myself, I work with some younger members of the community, and it is inspiring to see them come in and get excited about it. And many will do very well because they see what the application can do. They can see what you can do with the development and all of the emphasis behind it. But one aspect of development within Business Central, which doesn't get a lot of exposure, I think, here in the United States. I know in Europe it may be a little bit different, and I think there's maybe reasons for it, but it's automated testing. And Microsoft has within Business Central a number of tools available for us to work with automated testing. And I know you are, as you mentioned, you're the test automation mafia, or we may call you the Godfather of automated testing, since you want to go with the mafia. So, maybe you can say your new nickname is the Godfather of automated testing. But what is automated testing for those that may not know what it is?
Do you want me to step in, or are you going to give it a try, Brett?
I'm asking you. You step in. You are the Godfather. I am a young
Yeah.
Padawan.
Well, but maybe you're the guy that wants to show off to the Godfather. So no, just joking.
I'm not that young guy. I'm with you. I'm on the other side of this, where I think I already have
you put a
the
hat on.
extinct.
Oh, you do have the
exactly
hat of
it.
a mafia.
No, but it's a nice question. And if I would have if you would have posed this question 6 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, it probably would have been a different answer. I would now put it like test automation is in essence nothing more or less than testing. The only thing we do is that we automate it. And why do I say it that way? There is a lot more to details about it, and we'll get to that probably. But if you don't look at it from a functional perspective, we're having requirements, and we want something to be doing what the requirements is actually asking us to do. We need to verify it, and that's what testing is about, and that what's in the end is what test automation is about. So I always try to, especially in our world, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit later, but especially in our world, NAV BC, we're from, let's say, this background where the only thing that we did was manual testing. Yeah, we didn't have tools. Yes, there were generic visual tools, and people tried their best to use it, but wasn't always successful, especially with new releases. You had to update all the scripts. But that's what, let's say, our world is good at: functional testing, or maybe integration testing including. So I always try to show people, tell them, take that road. That's what you're good at. Of course, people getting new into this world with, for example, C# or JavaScript background, where they have been as developers creating unit tests, they look a bit at me like, why and whatever. So there's almost this conflict between functional, or the crash between functional and unit testing. But in the end, it's about validating that the software is doing what it needs to do. That's it. And let's not make it more complex. However, there's of course this side, and then you get to the unit test side, and I reckon that you know Vjekoslav Babic from Croatia, one of our MVP fellows. He's been on this C# thing for a long time and has been looking at code in BC, in NAV and BC, more from an object-oriented perspective than surely me and maybe many others too. And he's now, I'm really pleased that he stepped in explicitly on writing testable code. And that's becoming a little bit another story. That's a more technical approach, which I think still needs to be combined with the functional side, and he does, but I'm searching for a way, and a major part of the presentations I'm going to do together with another guy, by the way, on those conferences is about, okay, how can we bring this technical exercise and the functional thing for everybody? I'm not saying that Vjeko can't and is not doing it, but for functional people as also for the technical people nearer to each other. That's a bigger story about it.
That's great. No, test automation, is you hit on many key points where it allows you to verify that the application is working. And it also, it saves time, I think, from the development cycle, because you can test your code as you develop it to ensure that you get the expected results. And I think you can improve, the quality of what you deliver or develop. Not necessarily saying that it's quality. It's kind of a misnomer, I think. Quality in the sense that what you're going to deliver does not break, I guess, what your expected results are going to be. It doesn't mean that you're developing quality code like it's the most perfect code. It just means that the quality of it is going to pass a set of tests. And one thing I find with it is that it's repeatable and reliable. A lot of times, you mentioned like the branch of functional and technical validation or technical testing. Yeah, some people rely strictly on user testing. And me, what I found in my career is that user testing is not always repeatable and reliable, because you're relying on a person and assuming that they're going to test all cases or they're going to test properly. I've watched some users test where if you're testing a sales order process, they put in an item, they put in a quantity one, they put in the same price every single time. And they say, oh, it works.
Yeah.
But they don't test some of the downstream effects. They don't test with different quantities or different dollar amounts. And with the automated testing, it can reduce your risk and your cost as well, because we all know if you deliver something that doesn't work properly, it can be costly to fix it, but also if you rely on manual testing, it can be costly to test as well. So automated testing does provide some benefit as well. Within Business Central, what type of framework, or how would someone, from your perspective, go about testing or determining how or what to test with the code that they deliver?
So how to test, I think that's what I've been introducing to different teams as a test plan. So first of all, what kind of tests are applicable to the thing you want to test? And yes, the tooling around is there's not a lot of choice, in the sense of, okay, there are some visual tools, generic visual tools, not specifically for BC, that you could be using, but those are very slow and often very tedious to maintain. And we have in the platform what we call the testability framework that allows you to code the tests. So really, as AL developers, you're able to write a test, but then you still have this, there's breach between, or this threshold between functional and technical, about, okay, so what is going to show us that it's valid? What are the tests that we will use from a user perspective? And of course, if you're on the technical side with unit tests, it's a lot up to the developer. But I always try to get people out of the mud and think about, what tests are you going to do? even if you do unit tests, think about the units. What is this unit and what should it be doing? And then determine upfront what tests you need to create. Hopefully there might be some visual tooling also for BC, because that would help end users a lot. For end users, it's of course not always easy or even possible to automate from a code perspective their tests, and it would be very nice if they had a dedicated visuals tool to script their tests. But the options at this moment are not that big in the tooling. For me, that's not a bad thing. I manage well, and I think a lot of teams manage quite well with what is available. Because, as you said, Brad, and a lot of valuable additions you made to my first reply to your question, is that in the end it pays off a hell lot more than doing manual testing only, for different reasons. I mean, we're all more and more getting into this monthly update rhythm. Yeah, you can't cope. Nobody can cope manually with that. Well, some people, and I'm not sure if that's, as you said, Europe might be picking up more on test automation. That's my impression too. I have some impression from a couple of people that I heard talking from an American perspective, that, and I'm not mocking on that, but like, well, it always have been working nicely. There's no big risk, and that is an assessment. Yeah, so our code always has been doing well, and if shit did hit the fan somehow, it was never too big, and we were always able to manage that, to mitigate that within a short time. If that's your perspective, who am I to say that you should do test automation from that perspective? But as you added, you as a developer have direct feedback on your code. Yeah, so while if you have test automation in place for a feature you're going to update, you can run those old tests. So then you don't have regression, or you should have something falling over because you made an essential change. But while you're developing something new and write tests for that, you also get feedback. So yes, the quality of the code, exactly like you described it, the quality of what it's achieving is much better the first time delivery than before. I've been in teams where too often there was multiple rework cycles, which is costly. And yes, it maybe in the end did yield the same result, but eventually the first delivery looked like fast, and we did do well, but then let's say horror started, if I exaggerate a lot, because then a bug is found and it's fixed and another bug, and you keep on cycling, and then when do you decide to stop? And yes, that's something a lot of, I think, people that never worked with test automation is hard to realize for them, or me to prevail to them. This is one of the major values of test automation. Not only that you can run it, but that while you're developing, you have lesser issues injected.
I agree with you, and I do feel that presence of in the United States, it's not as well adopted. And I've come across several instances where I hear we don't have the time. I think because there's the push of let's get things done as quickly as possible, as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. And I always ask the question, well, do you have the time not to? Because what you had mentioned, I think what was commented earlier, is you don't have the time to spend a short period of time to write tests. But I know firsthand of projects where they said that, and then they had a failure of the code that they had delivered because there were no tests, and they had to pull in additional resources or additional talent from other projects, slowing those projects down to spend a significant amount of time to correct whatever they didn't test. Whereas if they would have spent a short time creating these tests, it would have been mitigated, because like you had mentioned, the quality of delivery is the key here. And that's another misnomer I guess people have, is you say, when I talk with them, well, you say the quality is better. It's the quality of what you deliver, not saying that the code is the quality piece of it. So we did get the chance
out here.
Say it again, Chris.
It's the Wild West still out here.
It is. It's sort of the old, I think, mentality of we can make modifications to the application, so we will, and it just works, and we just get it done as quick as possible, without
I
the
think
emphasis being on the quality.
it's a parallel, I think, which I think applies. It's like going on a hike, and then you see the top of the mountain, and the fastest way to go there is to walk in a straight line, and then going almost steep way up. That feels like you're getting there already, and then you find out that those, I don't know, dinosaurs decided to take the standard road, which is lingering from left to right, and yes, it's maybe twice as long, but they get up there and they're not tired, but they can continue in the next part. That's a bit the thing. It's somehow what maybe in all of our DNA, I don't know, or the DNA of us all, that we want to get in a straight line to the goal, and don't want to linger too much. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
With test automation or automated testing, I use the word test automation. I see some use automated testing, so I think it's synonymous, but
Yeah.
which do you prefer? I'm just throwing that out there now because I hear you say automated testing.
I even use in our team, the team where I work part time. I also call it AL coded tests, because we also have visual automated tests. So yeah, I use them in different. It depends on if I need to write. Depends on the sentence. Sometimes automated tests fits better in, and test automation feels a bit more like a machine, while automated test is the thing we're doing, or we're building, or we did test manually, but now we have it out. It depends a bit on. I don't know. What is it semantically? What is better for one or the other? I use all three of them: test automation, AL coded tests, and automated tests.
I like your explanation, automated tests versus test automation, because it's not a machine. With test automation, there's a couple things that I wanted to speak with you about. And one of them is, how much do you test? So when you're developing or when you're working within an application, what is your suggestion? And again, I understand there isn't I don't think with anything with ERP and software development, there is a one size fits all answer. But from your point of view, what should be tested? How much of the code should be tested?
At
And
minimum.
is code coverage part of that? How much code coverage should you shoot for? So there's kind of two questions in there: is how much should we test, what we should test, and is there a percentage or a view of code within code coverage that should be equated into how much you test?
Yeah, very relevant question. The challenge here is, of course, the perspective from anybody listening to us, but also the three of us, from where you're looking at. We need to automate tests. If we in the BC world, almost everybody has a big heritage from way ago. That could be 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, whatever. So in that perspective, you always need to make choices. In the end, testing is always about making choices. When I started to be a tester, a manual tester at Microsoft, I still can recall the feeling. I don't know the exact factual situation, that I realized I can't test everything as a manual tester. And actually, with test automation, it's exactly the same, although it's not exactly the same. The number of tests can be much bigger, but you can't test everything. So you have to make choices. It's also about risk management. Yeah. So, and let me make a bit a detour. on answering this. If you say you have to make choices, it's about so we have I don't know how much, if we put it in lines of code or number of objects or I don't know, features, we've got a lot in place. It's been out there for our customers for quite a while. Yes, we do get support issues reported, but it's not hell. So everything works reasonably well. Yeah, our customers, as far as I know, I'm making up a story, are pleased with us. They don't run away, at least. Could also put it a bit negatively. So why should we be testing that part? Of course, going to SaaS and with monthly update of Microsoft, well, some customers start to wonder, shiver a bit like, wait, every month we don't change anything, but Microsoft is changing. Is it still working? Yeah. So that might be a trigger like we need to do some automated tests or get them in place for existing functionality. Let's say that's one perspective. The other side is you're working as a, I don't know, ISV, VAR kind of thing on a product. It's an official product in AppSource, or it's a kind of PTE you duplicate to multiple customers, and you add new things to that. So the focus I would encourage everybody on is get your test in place for the new things. Yeah, that's what you're working on. And so that's two rough things. How much then? And because that was essentially your question, on the new part, the team I'm working on and some projects I'm also included in as an external, I bring up the thing of what I call a test plan. Sit down with the functional and technical people on this new project and determine what are the typical scenarios, the user scenarios, actually that you're implementing, what are you enabling the user to do. And eventually I would call that test cases. Yeah, but test cases is from a functional perspective no more nor less than validating the user scenarios. Yeah, so I as a user, if you would put it as a use case kind of thing, or user story, that's a broad or a very generic one, but there are specific variations of that. Define them in your test plan, and that's what you're going to test. Well, then somebody could have come up, these are hundreds of variations. Are we all going to test them? No, we're not all going to test them. So what do you do then? Well, people with knowledge of the context, the functional context, and specific even more of the new thing you're going to build, they need to point out these are the high prior ones. Yeah, and these are the lower ones. And given time, and over time you'll get some insight of yourself, seeing that of those, let's say 120 tests, the time given, we're able to get 40 high or critical processes implemented, including some critical corner cases. Let's get them in place. Yeah, you won't be able, in general, to maybe 120 is not the right number to give this feeling, but you won't be able to get the whole bunch implemented. Yeah, there's always restricted time. So choose your battles. So that's about prioritizing, and of course, include users if that's possible. If you have direct users, real users, or a user representative, get them included and get them also have a look at it and at the prioritization. That's one. And then, like you mentioned, Brad, code coverage. The team I'm working in, we have such a big solution that code coverage is only discouraging. So we don't do a lot of code coverage checks. But yes, of course, you can filter down on your code part, but it's in our case not always easy. But let's say if you're able to do, then you could see, hey, run code coverage, get code coverage recorded when you're running your test set and probably your automated test set. And then you could see, hey, we hit 40% of our code, which in the end is not a holy figure. if you would get to 100%, you would still have potentially a lot of functional tests missing. I mean, your test collateral might hit all your code, but that doesn't say that you did hit all the probable functional flows. So test code coverage is helping you to show you're missing a lot still. 40% is too low. If you get higher, it doesn't say you're covering everything, but it will help you to indicate, well, 40%, can we do with that? And you could even give that feedback to the customer. So this is what we did for you, if it's a one-off thing. But even if it's for a product for a bigger group of customers, you could tell them, this is what we invested. These things are working right. What do you want us to do? And of course, there's always a cost on that. More, okay. How are we going to finance that? Or is it still part of the budget? We agree upon this, and then it's clear. Anything that's outside of that coming back as support calls, you might be routing that back to the areas you did not cover. And then it's clear to everybody, that's the pain we.
It is. And I like to ask the question about code coverage from conversations because I agree with what you had said. It could kind of place the wrong emphasis. It doesn't say that it's not important to understand that your code's running, but I think to me, just because a piece of code is executed doesn't necessarily mean that you did something with it. I try to focus more on your test plan and your test cases to drive the results that you're looking to achieve. Because even if you cover the code, that code may not even be appropriate, or you may never hit that code because when you put that together, it may never be reachable in a sense. So you're trying to achieve a code coverage. I mean, to me, it's a good number to look at, a good number to use, because I can say I've covered the code. I've used it more for code analysis, kind of not from the testing point of view, but from, okay, so now we have our test cases, we have our test plan. This code was never executed. Why? If we've gone through all of our tests, we've gone through our test plan, why wasn't this executed versus trying to force it to be executed if we have those test cases. When testing a solution, we're talking about creating our own automated tests for the enhancement or the extension that we're creating for Business Central. Microsoft themselves has a set of tests within Business Central that you can execute as a customer, as an ISV or a partner to work in conjunction with your application. When running these automated tests, what is your viewpoint of including in your test suites the core Microsoft tests? Do you run through all of them to ensure proper functionality with all of those Microsoft tests along with yours, or do you just focus on your changes only?
I like you asking. There are a lot of people out there. Let's put it differently. For a long time, I've been advocating using them, and I felt a bit like this prophet shouting in the desert and nobody hearing you. I'm exaggerating, but I know there were a couple over time, a number of online sessions where actually Microsoft could have said, "Hey, run our test," and then I would asked them about it, and then they said, yeah, but that's up to you. To your question, in essence, I think you should always run them. But here again, you need to make choices. I mean, if manufacturing is of no relevance to you, yeah, why should you run the Microsoft tests that test the standard manufacturing features? No reason to do that. Yeah. In the past, when they started to and came up with the test set, they started the automated test in a CAL in 2009. Service Pack 1, that was the first platform that allowed us to do that. They released the test set the first time on NAV 2016 as, let's say, a push from partners. You want us to move into the cloud and get us better, deliver better quality, then deliver us your tests as part of the product. So it's only since 2015 when NAV 2016 came out. So 8 years plus that we have those tests available. At that time, it was one big FOB. You might know that in CAL, we exported our objects as FOB, and that is what you imported in an environment where you wanted to use that. It was one big bunch of 450 test code units. Hard to let's say split off and say these are only the tests relevant for me. So I ran them always as one bunch. That was also easy at that time. Now we have from Microsoft about 32 test apps, yeah? For banking, for general journal, for ERM. It's a big beast with including sales, purchase, finance. There's one big beast, SCM, for the supply chain management. Both of them have about 10,000 tests in each of them, and all the others are somewhat smaller, 400, 120, 500,000 tests. So it's much easier to only pick those apps that are relevant to you and run them on your environment. When would I run and what would I run? Let's first about what more or less I started to already elaborate on that you can make a choice. Banking is something that we added something to. Yeah, our product is enhancing this. So let's see if the standard banking thing is still doing what it should be doing. Yeah, it might also fall over in some instances because we have changed it, and that's a good thing too. I mean, when I ran all those tests at that time on NAV 2016, it was about 16,000 tests. I ran them overnight, and next day I was a bit dismayed that only 3,600 tests were successful. Oh, shoot. But then
Only 3,600, Kris, tests were successful.
Were successful. So 12,000 plus tests failed. And then at some time later, when I discussed it with guys from Microsoft, they said actually to me, and I hadn't looked at it that way, they said, be lucky that so many tests fall over because they're meaningful now for you. Yeah, they're hitting your code. And yes, they fall over, get it fixed. Well, actually, I was starting to fix it. And in 6 weeks of work, really of one person added up, I was mainly me, but also others. In 6 weeks of work, we got 90% of the tests successful, meaning they hit our code, and every time we change something, it's checking something on that code. And yes, we had various instances that 50 tests fell over. We had one instance, 1,500 tests fell over, 500 tests fell over of the Microsoft tests. Yeah, because we had customized GL, we had customized sales, we had customized purchase, we had customized some part of warehousing. There were some other parts, but that mainly. And a big part of those 16,000 tests were hitting that. So they meant a lot to us. And that's actually where we started. We didn't write our own tests first. We got those. Within 6 weeks, we had 14,500 tests, including those 3,500. So let's say 1,100 tests working for us. We would never be able to build them in 6 weeks, that amount of tests that would hit some part of our code. And later we added tests for the new things we build ourselves. So I think it's meaningful. It is challenging, especially since we went to those apps, and with going to AL, running tests is less performant than in the CAL time. That's my experience. It has improved again, but still. And there have been a lot of Microsoft tests when we went to AL falling over. At that time on CAL, less than 1% of the tests of Microsoft fell over when I ran it on Cronus with just standard Cronus. So I could turn them off, 100, 200 tests, or I could try to fix them, and some I could fix for very simple reasons. Let's not discuss that part, but in AL, a lot of tests fall over. Why? Because the state of the client changed, and that's not rolled back at the end of tests. So Microsoft had to enhance their tests so the state of the client would be reverted to the start. And a lot of, let's say, fellow developers, development teams got not much enthused to start using the Microsoft test. It has been approved a lot. Nowadays, I think still too many tests fail, but let's say there had been thousands of tests failing on a total of 30,000 plus tests, and now it's not thousands anymore. It's less. I helped Microsoft to test that. It has improved much more, but I know it has been a challenge for a long while. On the other hand, there is this devil in me say you're stupid if you don't run the Microsoft tests on things that you changed in the standard. Because if standard Microsoft should still be doing what it should be doing on regardless of our extension, then that's the proof. How do you know that? Are you going to write all your own tests actually duplicating Microsoft tests to prove that?
You hit on many key points in there, and that's, I know firsthand that I've witnessed where had somebody tested the core Microsoft functionality with some tests that they would have identified an issue. I've come across implementations where they've had data issues that nobody would have even noticed, but if they ran some additional tests or they ran through the suite of Microsoft tests, like you said, maybe not for the entire portion of it, maybe for a chunk of it, but even sometimes your code may have an impact on another process that you may not even be aware of, that you think is, it's, I hear people say, oh, it's safe for me to modify this here, or safe for me to extend this here, where then when you run the test, you find out another process was using your code, which created improper behavior. Another thing you talked about was the test isolation. And again, that's another topic that comes up with, test isolation, which, I'm of the school that anything that you do in your test should be set up within your test and then rolled back, because and you shouldn't assume that something's going to be there. Yes, you could have a code unit test that maybe you need to set something up and you want to run multiple tests instead of set it up and breaking down the data, Chris, not data. I'm learning, Luke, how to get rid of the Northeast accent. We have that over here where the data is data. So
Okay.
I'm trying to lose the R. It's a thing here where it's a regional within the U.S. the way we speak. We, for some reason, I would love to find the history of why the Northeasterners speak like that. But again, by having the test isolation set at the function level versus the code unit level, or even disabled, I've come across somebody that had it disabled, and they were arguing with me that you said that the tests roll back and shouldn't modify the data, and we found out that they shut off test isolation and they had it disabled, so it was changing the data. So your test should be isolated, like you had mentioned, and that way you ensure that if you run an individual test, everything that you need is set up and you can't assume it's there. I know some that wrote tests assuming that certain Cronus data was there, because again, you should write your tests and run it against a standalone database without the assumption. And it failed because they were assuming that Cronus data was there, and then Microsoft switched the data set. With, if you recall, with the locations, even with items, they went from bicycles to office furniture. So there was a number of changes there as well. So it's important to keep that all together. This automated testing is one key point that you talk about with the monthly updates too, that I wanted to touch upon with you. With it being automated testing, you have the opportunity to run your tests against the future releases. And, many customers get that, in their production environment, or, when Microsoft runs the checks to see if they can be upgraded. Oh, well, one of your extensions, this, has a breaking change or violates. I forget the exact message in this conversation right now, but I think we all know what that means. And then they call up and they say, what is this problem? Or they get the email notifications. I mean, a lot of partners or implementers will have the email to them as well too. But it's just almost like to me, it's a bad image, because now it's the customers telling you that there's going to be a problem with their update. instead of you having tests that can be automated and checked all on its own monthly, to verify that the next release won't have a problem, and you can be proactive and make the fix before the customer gets alerted to you having an error. And that's one big point where automated testing, I have found personally, is helpful, is it can help prevent those. And then if you have a repository with the customer's extensions, you can just let those tests run monthly or periodically to make sure that your customers' extensions are going to be compatible with the new release. I know we have a major release coming up in April. I'm sure many customers will start getting those emails, even more so with this major wave, that a lot of these older extensions will cause problems, and then there's a scramble to fix them.
There's an unfortunate side on this, like many things on test automation. You have to experience, in the end, you have to really experience it before you believe it. Like, let's say Thomas in the Bible, he only believed it when he saw Jesus really appearing to the people. And apparently, and I say it's unfortunate, apparently it's maybe also part of our DNA. In this, when we started in 2016 with test automation, there was an end user company with our own development team. It was, people understood that it would be meaningful, but only when the story, what I'm going to tell you is happened, they were really convinced. And that was the case. We were working on getting the Microsoft test working on our solution. I spent the first 2 weeks getting this 3,500 test uplifted to 11,500, something from 23% to 72, or almost 80% of the tests successful. We were not finished yet, and on Thursday night we already had a kind of pipeline running with every night a full run of all those tests. And while we were still getting that in place, it was not set yet. On Thursday night, the tests were run again. One of our developers had checked in. That's the Team Foundation server version of commit in Git, which he had checked in a change. And the next morning, 1,500 tests failed. Yeah. 1,500 more. There were still some other tests failing. 1,500 tests had fallen over that were successful the night before on Wednesday night. So I call that shit hit the fan. The changes would go live over the weekend. So Monday, our customers, our colleagues also, but the ones using it was a school books reseller company. So in the warehouse, Monday, shit hit the fan. On Friday, I had seen 1,500 tests failing, but I was not able to identify, to really analyze what had happened because of the work we still were doing. But on Monday, from Monday morning till Tuesday afternoon, 3 people were busy to clean up the shit, to fix it, but also the changes that were made. Inconsistent data changes, you could say, they had to fix that too. 2 days by 3 people. While we could have seen it, but we were not set to see it. That one convinced everybody. If we would have had it in place, and it was not that we were blocked by, in the sense of people working against that, not wanting us to do that, but it was clear to everybody from that moment on, this is the value. And that's exactly this story of what you're saying, Brad, running your code and the tests on the next minor and major release. And for that, you need to build pipelines. There is this Git ALGO for GitHub facility, which allows everybody to step in at a low threshold. There are solutions which we are using too with scripts on Azure DevOps because of some still more advanced things we can do there. But anybody could get this in place. And one of the first things with a pipeline is that you get the pipeline, technically rebuild your solution from scratch and get that deployed. But then later on, once you have that pipeline, it's not that difficult to add the tests to it, to get a test app deployed, run the test, collect the result, and put that on a portal, Azure DevOps or whatever. There's only this threshold. Yeah, we've never done that, and we don't know how to do it. There are a lot of people advocating, like Freddy for AL Go for GitHub. There's a lot of documentation around it. AL Go for GitHub already has, it's more or less just get your code in GitHub with the right template, and a lot is already done for you. But it is this, what we call cold water fear. We've never done it. So will it be too cold?
You don't know till you get in. It sounds like a lot with the automated testing. You're saying some large numbers of tests, and we have to put these tests together. And verbally, as it's explained, it sounds like a lot, right? Versus trying to weigh the benefit. But is in the conversations I have, I tell everybody it's like anything else. Once you start doing it and you do it regularly, it becomes easier and faster. I can code quickly because I've been doing it since the dawn of time. Automated tests, I can create my tests faster because I already have the habits to build my test cases, build my test plans. I'm familiar with the Microsoft libraries to generate data, that is DATA. I'm trying here to generate the data so that I don't have to build up so much. I could use some of the libraries for generating random data in text and numbers and quantities quickly. So that's one thing that I would like to also throw into the conversation is it's like anything else. With experience will also come the efficiency of being able to create these quickly without having to learn how to do it. So with that, you've done a lot with automated testing. You present a lot with automated testing. One other thing I wanted to bring up, because you are the godfather of automated testing, because you also wrote a book on automated testing, I believe. So could you tell us a little bit about the book of automated testing and what its focus is and how it can be used?
Of course, I got a copy here. I need to show it, of course, for those who are more visual. It's next to my table on the floor. This one is the second edition from 2 years ago. I wanted to write this already in 2011 because then it was already in the platform enabled. Actually, most of the thing technically that we can do nowadays was already in the platform on NAV 2009 Service Pack 1. That was in the summer of 2009. And I suggested to Pact, the publisher eventually also publishing the book, to do that. But it was not picked up by a lot around. Of course, I don't know if they did in kind of survey around, but they didn't pick it up. And in 2018, there was this, how you could say, this pivotal moment, more or less, of people picking up on AL. Or it was already there for a while, but 2009, I recall you had them in your last published podcast, Stefano and Duilio. They had written a book, a quick start guide, something like that, on BC development. So that was the first development book, a small one, 200 pages, that they had written, and I was asked to review it. And I thought, if I need to step in with test automation, it's now. So I wrote a smaller version. The first version was also 200 pages. They wanted to see if it made sense to do that. And what I wanted to do is to help everybody, not to just talk about this is technically what you can do and whatever, but to also more or less sit next to everybody to explain, oh, this is how you could do it, and this is actually the goal of what you want to achieve with your test automation, and you could do it this way, but feel free to do it your way. With the second edition, we added a lot more because of things evolving, and the first edition apparently did sell well enough. They allowed me to double the number of pages, and I included also a first step for me too on writing testable code. So not just doing it from a functional perspective, like you say, the quality is that it works like we want it to work, but there's also a quality side on the code. If we keep on writing this, if I call it disrespectfully spaghetti code, which we did in the CAL time, and in some way we, as I see some code continue in the AL time, we're on the verge of needing to change our habits there and be more on the modern way of, let's say, object-oriented approach of writing your code. And that's what Vieco it's advocating already for a longer time, and since a year or so, explicitly also on writing testable code, so that your tests are much easier to build and much faster, much lesser number of tests needed also. So that was one of the goals of the second book too, and to include a couple of other practical things. And apparently, hearing every once in a while of seeing some posts, I did hit on some string or some nerve that people started to pick it up and said yes. Some were autodidactical on that, and that's fine, of course, but a lot needed somehow this push, this small extra step to get onto the or over the threshold to really start doing it. For me, yeah, one of the things included in that, or implicitly, is it's not that difficult. It's not rocket science. Just go, and that's always often the threshold. Start. Take your first step. Get it moving. Your solution might look like a Mount Everest. There's so much in it. We know we'll never get to cover it with tests. No. If you stick at the foot, at the bottom in the valley, you will never get to the top. So just start walking, and that's what test-driven development learned me also. It's something in my veins for sure, but test-driven development hit upon step by step. Just take the first step, and the next will follow. Don't. Well, if you're doing the dishes manually, there might be a whole bunch around. Just start. If you don't start, it will never get done.
You mentioned a couple things. One, just to throw back, the name of the book is Automated Testing in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. And you do have the second edition, which is available. You could search for it, and it does show up where they could purchase it. Someone could purchase it if they were interested in doing
It's
so.
this mafia.
But it's the mafia. It's
the mafia.
the Godfather of Automated Testing. So you brought up a point that I did have noted that I wanted to mention. You brought up test-driven development. This is one of the things that I also bring up when I talk about automated testing, because it goes back to what we're talking about with quality of code, where we have that, is the quality of delivery versus the quality of what you write. But test-driven development is a way for, from a development point of view, someone to think what I'm doing before I start writing, and then you write and test. So it's almost where you build your tests first. And by building those tests first and understanding and getting the desired outcome, I know personally I've done that quite a bit now, because early on I would work on code and then I would write my tests. And what I found is going the other way, test-driven development, it helped me modularize the code better. So I had smaller pieces of code. So no longer do you have those days where somebody will have one function, procedure, method, whatever term you want to use. It's called procedure in the coding language, but I see everybody use different words for it to match with other development languages, where you had one function do everything. Doing test-driven development for me personally helped me break those functions out to small chunks so that I could have a function do a specific task and then put those tasks together to create a desired outcome, which is the benefit of test-driven development, because you can code test instead of code. and then realize you may have to refactor your code in order to test it properly.
And that code probably entails a lot more than was asked for. Yeah, so building by being driven by the test, you only build what the test need to do. I mean, you can only add code so the test will be successful. And if you add more code, yeah, that's still possible, but you don't need to, because the only thing you want to know, test one, successful. Add some next test, add some more code, successful. So that's the only thing you're going to build, what is asked for. I mean, if the tests are the things that was asked for, that's what you build. Nothing more, nothing less.
I like your comment at the very end too. You said you got to start. I think that's important, especially if you haven't done it. If you've never done it, you just have to put some time aside and start and be consistent. I think there's a Denzel Washington quote, without commitment, you'll never start. But importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. So you have to, once you start, you got to stay consistent, and it'll just be second nature, is what Brad is saying. You'll get faster. You'll be faster with it.
True. Yeah, surely true.
You reminded me of one thing as you were talking about this. I did come across reviewing code at one point for a test, and this was probably one of the best tests I've ever seen written. Is we had a test procedure. You had the test attribute for the test, and all of the code was remarked in it. So there was no code in the test. So the test always worked. There was no assertion, no error, or there wasn't any check or validation. And I was like, well, it passed the tests, I guess. The code executed passed the test.
I can easily provide any
that,
customer. I can easily provide any customer with thousands of tests that are always successful.
It's so funny.
Yes. But along those lines, you've been working with this with many of us since the dawn of the dinosaurs. What would you say was your worst, or not maybe worst, but do you have a horror story of an implementation that you could share with us? So the question is, what is in your years of implementing Business Central, what is one of those implementations that stands out in your mind as you would call as like a horror story?
Actually, the hardest is one that eventually did not continue. Or I was no longer involved with it anymore. I don't know. I now realize, but it was so bad requirements. Yeah. So it's somebody. They already started and had 2 calls before what we call refinement sessions on discussing the details, and I was called in on the 3rd one. And at the end, I said to my direct colleagues, I've never have been in such a bad condition or setup like this one. So, and you could say that relates to some other things. Where things go wrong is that you have nobody really understanding what they want. Yeah. So then you can, and the younger you are, the more probable you are that you would try to make something out of it. The more older you are, you realize, or maybe you realize you don't have the energy to make anything out of it, or you're more wise and realize, if we're not going to stop this, this is going to be a disaster anyway. And related to that, very often I say I'm doing a lot of development training to newbies, often youngsters, but also people getting into our world and not that experienced maybe. I always mention, if something goes wrong, there's a bug appearing, being found while we test it or reported by a customer later on, it's probably the requirements. Often it's pointed, let's say we're sitting here as developers, to me, to you, or whomever. As we say in the Netherlands, maybe it's a general, if you point with one finger to somebody else, 3 are pointing to you. Yeah. So they would get to my desk and say, hey, what did you do? And then we would find out, there's something wrong. But actually, I just implemented what was asked for. So what did we? I always try to tend I always tend and try to say we, because I've been part of it anyway. So who am I to blame them? I didn't see the omission in the requirement apparently too. But what did we not see? So very often bugs are not a bad-mooded developer as the cause, but maybe a bad-mooded customer or a bad-mooded business analyst, or maybe I don't know what, a not well-qualified consultant. So often, and I recall another situation, we had a kind of sprint planning discussion, and there was somebody coming up with a requirement, and I said, well, so what do we do? Yeah, we need to add something more. Well, then I said, we're not going to pick it up today. Yeah, but we need to finish it next week. Well, if we need to finish it next week, they should have given us better requirements. So you go back, and he was not pleased, and I fully understood. He was even sweating, but he later came back and said, thank you very much, not as such, but that to show that I'm this guy, whatever, but that he realized if I hadn't been stopped, we would have been in shit the next week, because we would not be able to deliver quality, because there was missing parts, let's say not a quality understanding of what was needed.
Requirements gathering is important.
Thank you for sharing.
Very important.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is extremely important. Along with that, reminds me of another. We're talking about quotes and sayings and stuff, but one thing I learned early on in my career, I do have some horror stories. Chris will have to share some of those. Thank you for sharing your story, Luc. Sometimes no business is better than bad business. That's something that reminded me of with that as well too. And with that, Luc, thank you very much for taking your time to speak with us today. We both appreciate it. I've been looking forward to speaking with you for a long time because of the things that you have done within the Business Central community. One of the focuses for me is test automation, automated testing. So it's a privilege to be able to speak with you.
Speak to the Godfather.
I thank you. Yes, I'm speaking to. I can now say I spoke to the Godfather, and I will put that down. And
well, I can tell them I spoke to Brad and Christopher. That's also getting a known couple.
Thank you.
A famous one.
Thank you. But with that, would you please tell everybody how they can get a hold of you or see some of the other great things that you're doing? You have a lot of initiatives and you do a lot of great things within the Business Central community. And if anybody's interested in learning more and seeing what you have done, what's the best way to do so?
Well, the best way for test automation is my book, I guess. But of course, there are some other parts. I'm running this channel called Areopa Webinars. Every bi-week, I'm organizing a webinar where I'm inviting others to speak on topics that, and I'm scanning a bit the world we're in to see, oh yeah, this is maybe an interesting topic, especially when I'm on conferences which are not recorded. I will ask people, like I did ask Andrzej Zwisowski to talk about the topic he presented on directions. Similarly, next week we'll have Kamil Sajak, the Czech MVP, who did a presentation on Days of Knowledge in Denmark last year on Solid, which is part of writing testable code, you could say, or the other way around, whatever. He will rerun that next week, and so I'm trying to get hold of people, and if you have a topic, be welcome too. It's recorded, it's put on YouTube, Areopa Webinars. It has its own channel there, and I'm also once in a while picking up my own topics. So there are, I know it's now almost 5 years that this is the 5th season that we're running it. I think maybe 5 or 8 of the 83 sessions we did is let's say on my name about test automation. So you will find a lot there. I'm doing different other things too, but this is typically the niche I was able to step in. I think I'm a good teacher on coding, but there are, I think, better technical people presenting those topics, and I'm at ease with that because I learn from them. So try to gather those. So maybe Areopa webinars is next to my book, the best one to go and have a look and see what I'm trying to share with all. And that's not only mine, but enabling others to share things with us. So I guess that's the two major things.
Very good.
Oh, no, great. Thank you. So it's your book on automated testing. As we mentioned, you can search and that information will come up and someone can view and purchase the book if necessary. And then the Areopa webinars, we'll put that link on there as well too, which is a great repository. I've looked at it for information from not only yourself, but other great members of the community. So
if I may interrupt to mention on Areopa, people that want to step in presenting, I think Areopa is a good platform. I've been coaching a number of people that stepped into. It might feel as, let's say, known names like Vieco has done a webinar, Camille, Waldo, but there are also others that dare to step in, and it's not. It might feel for the people watching it, it's a high threshold, but it's not. If you have a topic and you want to start learning it, some new guys like David Veldhoff stepped in, Tina Staric stepped in. For them, it felt like, okay, I can do it. So if people like to step in but feel a bit uncertain about it, they're welcome to reach out to me, and I'm pleased to get them on, because I had to learn it too. We all need to learn. There is no sudden famousness that allows you or enables you to do that. We all need to step in and try and see, okay, this works okay, and everybody has a story in the end. It's the value of the story in my perspective that's more important than the way you present it.
Indeed.
And with the theme of what we've been saying, you have to start somewhere, right? Again, if you're trying to climb a mountain, you have to start climbing. And Areopa is a good opportunity for someone who would like to present and that may be a little apprehensive about trying to present at a conference because they're not certain what it's like. At least they can sit and do a recording and present that way to at least become familiar and comfortable with presenting material before maybe they step into conference submissions. So it could be a good stepping stone to get somebody into sharing their information with others. So
True.
it's a good way to go. So
I have a quick question.
Thank you again.
What's that behind you right there? The big old piece. Is that piece of wood?
I was afraid to ask.
This
Yes.
one. Yeah. That's a big piece of marble.
Wow.
Let me see if that makes sense to pick up my camera. It's a piece of art made by my brother-in-law when he was still educated to become a how do you call it, what is it? The one that makes statues, etc.
Oh yeah.
So the arts, and there are the spots you see are eyes. There are a whole bunch of eyes looking at us every day. So it's a rough Italian piece of marble. By the way, he's Italian also, and he started to create those eyes in it and make it very neat, a very neat and smooth surface on it.
Wow. It's a fascinating piece. I had to
beautiful.
ask.
I do see the bottles of. No, I was afraid to ask. I wasn't certain if I should, Chris. I'm glad that you did that. I do see the bottles of wine there. See, I always have all these ideas, Chris. We have to start doing this stuff. Like maybe let's come up with what's a picture of the office of where you work or something so we can see some of these fascinating. And I see you have some art hanging from the wall behind you as well, too.
Actually, this is our kitchen where I'm sitting. That's my office.
That's nice.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate all that you
Yes.
do, and more importantly, we appreciate the time that you spent with us, because time is something that we don't get back. And anybody that spends time giving that to us, we appreciate greatly. I know as a dinosaur myself, I'm on the other side. I have less time left than the time I've spent. It's just the nature of, the species. So with that, thank you again. And we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.